Today's topic, building a budget with cash flow. Budgeting, one of the most important, but also one of the most boring words in personal finance. A lot of that is probably because the context of budgeting has probably been portrayed incorrectly for many decades. So in today's video, my goal is to make budgeting exciting, right? Let's make it exciting. We'll walk through how to build a budget. We'll talk through good debt versus bad debt. We'll talk about savings, and we'll talk about how a lot of these little tweaks can lead to just better overall financial wellness. So stay tuned. That is all coming up next. First up, how do we actually create a budget? In full disclosure, there's probably a million different ways that you can actually build a budget. The key is you gotta build one, right? You actually have to take this first step. Down below in the show notes as well, we'll put a few other resources for you. We'll actually have the blog post as well. We'll have links to some other resources as well. Personally, our family uses Tiller. I think Tiller is a great budgeting tool. Think of Tiller as your more common like Google Sheets or also an Excel spreadsheet way of budgeting. That's how I think about budgeting. Another very popular one with our clients is called YNAB. You need a budget, so YNAB. You don't have to use those. You can just build it in Excel on your own. You can use a pen and paper. I don't care how you do it, but make sure you do it. So finding what you want to actually use to create your budget is going to be the very vital first step, just getting started. 3 other steps that we note from that point forward. So once you have where you want to do this, we like technology here because it makes it easier going forward. If you have your bank account linked, you have your credit card linked, it's pulling in the data. You might just have to label some things or build some categories. But here are the 3 main steps to budgeting consistently. Track all of your spending for a few months. I usually say a lot of these types of habits will take 3 to 4 months to get a good idea. But once you do that, maybe you fall in love with it and you keep doing it. But even if you don't, maybe you circle back for a quarterly check-in. Maybe you do semi-annual, maybe you do annual. But the key is out of the gate to find where you are, right? To kind of build in your baseline, you want to track it for usually about 3 to 4 months. Sometimes it's hard around the holidays. You have the Santa budget skyrockets on you. You're hosting everybody at your house for Thanksgiving. That's a tough time. So maybe you're finding a period of time that fits like your usual spending. There, you want to then compare to your take-home pay. I usually say this is probably the easier part. You have your pay stub, you have all your deductions up here, you got to pay Uncle Sam, you got your benefits, and then boom, you have that number that actually hits your bank account. So you want to make sure you're tracking that. Ideally, the income number is higher than the expenses every single month. Could there be some months where that doesn't work out because you had holiday spending, you had the big family summer trip, you took the whole crew down to Disney? Most of the time, you want to make sure you have plenty of room in there. This is what we really label as your discretionary spending. You have wiggle room inside of there. And then the third step we put in the blog post below, but also just on how we describe it, is review it and revise it. This is not set in stone. Things are going to change. It's okay. That is normal. Plenty of course corrections in life are vital. That's going to happen. Those are all good things. So those 3 steps, finding good technology, are vital first steps. And you could argue it's not possible without taking that first step. You actually have to commit to this. And then from that point forward, find your rhythm, find how often you want this frequency to be on reviewing your budget. One thing that we love, we have some of our clients that will do financial date nights. They'll sit down with their spouse or significant other, or maybe it's just them. That's the night that they order sushi in. They review their budget, whether that's a quarterly basis, whether that's a semi-annual, maybe it's a monthly thing. I'm all for monthly date nights, so that's fantastic. That is where you're going to want to start. So build the budget, track the money coming in, track the money going out, revise and review. It's not set in stone. That's all normal. So get started with your budget. Next up, good debt versus bad debt. And another common theme, I probably should have noted this in the first section. We think a good outline for budgeting is what we call the 50-30-20 rule. So 50% of your budget would be dedicated to your living expenses, 30% would be dedicated to your lifestyle, and then 20% would go towards savings and or debt. And we're going to get into that debt conversation now. So good debt versus bad debt. Let's start with bad debt. What do we think we would label as bad debt? Well, credit cards, personal loans, car loans, high on this list. We used to note payday loans, but hopefully no one's taking payday loans anymore. So those are the 3 most common we see. And I use car loans because cars are vital, right? You got to get from point A to point B. Our concern is most people buy cars that are too fancy, or we continue to see this where cars are now getting financed out to like 7 years. You're probably not even going to drive that car for 7 years, let alone that car will maintain its value. Cars, for the most part, are a depreciating asset. Unless you're some crazy car collector and you know how to find those diamonds in the rough, let's just assume that cars APRs are a bad asset. So what are we focusing on here? Bad debt in terms of budgeting, we want to get this stuff paid off as quickly as possible. Now there's two types of what we call debt snowballs. We did not make this up. Actually, I think we give credit to Dave Ramsey on this. I think he's the snowball creator. There's two that we label. We label one as a psychological snowball, and then the other one is the APR snowball. APR, which just means what's your interest rate, is technically the proper way to do it, meaning that if you have three forms of debt, you're going to tackle the highest interest rate first. So if you have 20% interest rate, think about credit cards, you have student loans at 7%, and then you have a car loan at 4%. We want to go after the credit card debt. And most of the time, credit cards will be your higher form of APR. So in this form of debt snowball, you're going to pay most aggressively on the highest rate first. Once that one's paid off, take whatever that monthly payment was, push it into the next one. Rinse and repeat, push it into the next one. All your debt is gone. There's another way to do this, which we call the psychological snowball. And the main takeaway here is we don't really care about APR, which again, this is not your finance 101 answer, but this could be more important from a psychological perspective. And usually what will happen here is they'll go after the lowest balance first. It's almost like get that momentum going and keep it going. So in this example, you have a debt of 1,000, you have a debt of 5,000, you have a debt of 10,000. You're going to go after the 1,000 first. So once that's paid off, then roll that payment into the next one. Once that's paid off, roll that payment into the next one. And keep in mind, no matter which one you're going for, you likely have minimum payments, so you can't just put all your time and energy into the top one, but that's where we're going to roll into the next one. So if you're making the minimum payment on the next two, you're going to then roll in whatever you're being aggressive on to get to that next one. So APR snowball, psychological snowball, I don't care how you do it. If you're going to follow Finance 101, technically you always go after the higher rate, but we also have seen a lot of success on individuals just kind of getting one knocked out and then going for that next one. Those are bad debts. We want to get those out of our way as quickly as possible. Now, good debt, which for all intents and purposes for the clients that we work with, our physicians are usually looking at two forms of what we label as good debt: student loans and then your mortgage. And this is where I would say it depends on what track you're on, right? If you're going for public service loan forgiveness, we don't really have to give it any extra resources. We know our payment, we follow their income-driven repayment number, we know our number, we follow the rules for 10 years. You don't get any brownie points for paying it off anytime sooner or making higher payments, I should say. If you're going for a more aggressive payoff, maybe it's a 5 to 10 year number, we still have our number. If our goal is to pay off our student loans in 7 years, here's the number we want to pay, boom, we have that number. Could you be more aggressive? You could, but let's kind of add some context to it. Same with the mortgage. If your mortgage rate is 2 or 3%, pretty cheap money. But we're now seeing those rates kick up now. If your rate is 6 or 7%, maybe we do want to be a little bit more aggressive on our mortgage here. My main takeaway from good debt is we also first want to confirm that you're on track for your longer term goals. So if you say, hey, I want to retire at 60, let's make sure your savings numbers have you on track for that. If you want to retire at 50, let's make sure your savings numbers are on track for that. And then once we know if you're on track for that, anything left over, anything extra, we can still be even aggressive on that good debt. So that's one of those sections where we come in and say, it's not to say we don't want you to pay off your mortgage sooner or pay off your student loans sooner, assuming that you're going for private payoff. We just want to make sure you're on track for your other goals first, and then we can add some more energy into there. So good debt versus bad debt, understanding those snowballs, and again, bad debt, get it out of your way as quickly as possible. Next up, building your savings. So this is one of those ones where savings can mean a lot of things. This could be you starting to build up an emergency fund. This could be you putting money to your retirement. This could be putting money towards your retirement home. You want to have this vacation home at some point, you're putting money away for that. This could be for your kids' education. There's a lot of ways to think of savings. And if we kind of come back to that note I said earlier, that 20%, you want to have a good portion going to this. Obviously, debt payments could eat into this, which again, would come back to the sooner we can get the debt out of your way, the higher we can get this number sooner than later. One thing to keep in mind, try not to have this number at zero, right? You should always be saving something, whether that's loading up your emergency fund just to give you some wiggle room, some peace of mind, or it's always making sure at a minimum, you're at least getting your employer match. We realize at certain phases of your career, this could be harder because you have other priorities, things that are kind of competing for that dollar. But at all times, I ask of you to always be putting something away, even if it's only 3% to the 401k to get the 3% match, or maybe it's a little bit higher than that. Maybe it's $2,000 to your emergency fund just to build up cash and have some extra wiggle room in there. So for this one, the goal is to always be saving something. And then as you move along in life, ideally that debt number continues to come down, which will give you ultimately more flexibility to put that extra portion then into your savings. So keep an eye on savings, always be putting something into your savings account. But for the long-term success of your financial plan, this is probably the most vital portion of the overall budget, is making sure that you're getting money into the markets, making sure that you are saving. And I use the term markets because when you think of your 401k or Roth IRA or whatever we're going to plug in here from an investment perspective, most powerful tool is just time, and time leads to compounding interest, which is why I always say I don't want this number to ever be at zero. A little bit is better than nothing. A lot is even better, but let's start some goals that we can achieve and then build that momentum. And in closing, I always put a note here on financial wellness. I think your financial well-being doesn't get enough credit, right? The overall psychological benefits of having a budget in place, knowing that here's my money coming in, here's my money going out, here's what I have left over. I'm on track to max out my 401k. I just did my first ever backdoor Roth IRA. I got money going to the kids' 529 plans. Those are all very little wins that lead to huge success in your long-term financial plan. So rack up some of those victories, make sure that you are tracking your budget, make sure you are tracking your income, your expenses, and celebrate these wins. Personal finance is one of those ones where, as I noted earlier, you have to have a lot of victories, a lot of small victories to get that bigger victory. So don't overlook that. Remember that feeling, oh my gosh, I just went through an entire month of expenses. It's organized, it feels good. My tiller's up to date, or my YNAB is up to date, or I just had a date night with my spouse and we just had our first money date night. These are all things that you need to celebrate because they're very important, not only for your long-term financial plan, but your overall financial wellness and your financial well-being. So celebrate those wins. And there you have it, creating a budget with cash flow. As I noted at the start, not the favorite topic in personal finance, but I would argue it's one of the most vital, if not the most vital topic in personal finance. So as always, thank you for spending some time with me on this video today. If you have not subscribed, now would be a great time to subscribe. And then if you click on the little bell icon, you will get notified every time we release new content. As always, thank you for joining me. And we're hoping that this gives you some good clarity on your budgeting to help you on your financial journey. And then I will see you on the next video.